If I see a guy out there and he's saying masculinity is awesome, go work hard, get in shape, and then he also says go sleep with as many women as possible and don't care about their feelings, which is evil and toxic, I'm gonna believe both of those things because he's the only one that's telling me, yes, be a man. But if it's, I either follow this guy over here, 75% of what he says is great, 25% of it's toxic, or I follow this society over here that says don't be a man, be inauthentic to yourself and be feminine, well, guess what? I'm picking this side all day long.
She was all prepared to go back to her job, and then she was holding Scarlett in her arms in the nursery. She looked at me, she goes, I'm not going back. You figure it out. Men will figure it out. That's what we're built to do. Like, you don't have to stress, you don't freak out. And I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. I'm here to support you. She's like, I'm here to help you in every way, but I'm not going back. And she never went back.
Hey y'all, Josh Tomioni with the Derelict Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey, you derelicts. Welcome back to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. We have a very special guest today, somebody who actually reached out to me to be on the podcast, which I was shocked by because probably for the last year or so, I've been quoting him. And when I was quoting him, I didn't even realize he was alive for whatever reason. And I think I told you this, Geoff, the other day when we were talking. For whatever reason, I think it's because of the fact that he has his name as Geoff Michael Hopf. It just seemed like this kind of old school name of somebody that, recorded, I don't know, 100 years ago or something. So anyway, here's one of the best quotes of all time. And Geoff can't stand it that I'm starting the podcast with this because he's been inundated about this quote probably for as many years and since he wrote it. But I'm going to start with it anyway, because I think it's mainly what we're going to talk about today. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Now, me being the type of person that I am, just loved the quote, and I talk about the quote all the time. I actually read an entire book that was kind of based on the quote, which is interesting because I didn't even read Geoff's book where the quote came from, nor have I even read any of Geoff's books to date, which is a terrible thing to admit when you're introducing a guest on a podcast. So if you've been following around for a while, you realize we don't really do this like every other podcast. So fucking sue me. I failed. I didn't even read his book before the podcast. But you know what? I'm going to commit right now to you, Geoff, and to the entire audience that I'm going to read the book. If you want me to read that book, if it's a different one, let me know. But I'm going to read where that quote came from before we talk again.
Okay. Well,
unless there's another book you want me to read.
Yeah,
but anyway, let me introduce you real quick, and then I want to hear. So Geoff is really fascinating to me. One of the reasons I was really interested in talking to him is because he's a New York Times bestseller times a bunch. You've written over 40 books, right? Mm-hmm. He is a Marine, a veteran. There's some interesting family dynamics that I kind of want to get into a little bit later on, maybe your brother-in-law and what happened in his 40s, because I know we were wanting to talk a lot about masculinity and what happens to men, especially midlife. And a quote that you said to me when we were first talking about you being on the podcast is you said, there's failing and then there's failure. So we're going to unpack that a little bit as well. So without further ado, Geoff, thank you for being on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Josh, thank you very much. It is definitely an honor to be here. I appreciate it. There's a lot to unpack there. I always like to joke about that quote now. I think I was telling you, it's the quote that launched 1,000 death threats. That had no idea why that would be. But we can dive into that.
Do you think it was actually 1,000?
No, I didn't count 1,000, but it kind of ties in with, there's the thing about Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships, I think it ties back to that. But
Well, there's actually a very specific reason I'm asking is because if you know who Mr. Beast is, the most popular YouTuber of all time, right? Mr. Beast did a video a while ago and he was doing a podcast interview. I love his stuff because the guy's so fascinating. He's so young. He's so successful. He just drives. He gets stuff done. So love him or hate him, you got to respect the game. And he was talking about how he's found that the more the video that he does that helps more people, the more death threats he gets.
Yeah, people have an interesting reaction to information. They like when you look at the quote, like, why would someone be really upset about it? So you have to kind of break that down and distill that down. It's like, all right, why would someone become so upset that they would tie me to like white supremacy? I'm a Nazi, I'm a right winger. One, why is that quote even attached to a political ideology anyway? Why
do you think it's timing?
Yeah, well, the timing of it was clear. So you had the someone on the right using it during the 2020 election, which then brought some, and then so if that person's using it, now you clearly have to attack it. That in it by itself is what's shameful about being a part of team politics, as they say. And when you enter in and when you become part of a team, then you have to abandon all principles in so many ways. Instead of being a free thinking person that has your own views, which can be typically on a spectrum, by the way. You look at anyone who's like free thinking individual, they might say, well, I'm probably a little bit more conservative or more liberal or whatever that is. But really, most people are just on a spectrum. If you were to lay things out, they might believe this way when it comes to finances, but on social things, they might be a little left of center and right over here. So they're not like always sitting in a specific camp. And the problem when you sit in a specific camp, then you would it's like being in a cult in some ways. You can't deviate from that. You can't speak outside of that. And so if someone on the right brought up that quote and liked it, if you're in the opposing camp, you now have to hate. You not only hate that person, now you have to hate everything that they like. If they like that quote clearly must be a Nazi quote. That quote must be this. A quote must mean it must be a right-wing quote. Therefore, I won't take the time, have the intellectual curiosity to kind of dive into it and understand what it means. I'm just going to attack it. And then I'm going to attack the person who wrote it.
On that point too, Geoff, like I'll be the first to admit what I already admitted on this podcast is the fact that I loved the quote and didn't do any further research. Like I didn't go and read your book. I didn't find out anything about you. I thought you were a dead guy from 100 years ago. So
well,
I did the same thing.
I feel like an old guy when you were helping me with all these tech issues earlier. So I feel like I was 100 years old.
I'm just trying to, I use AI every day just to try to stay young. So
I used to think I'm pretty. I did adapt pretty quickly to the tech issues we had. A lot of you people didn't know we had some tech issues to begin with. All my fault. But and you might hear some dings now because I'm still trying to figure that out. I know I figured it out, but it keeps popping in.
There's pretty much tech issues every single time you do an online podcast. It's one of the non-joys about doing this online. So
I hope anything that happens isn't too disruptive to your listeners and viewers. So.
Well, I'm hoping everything's disruptive, but disruptive
well, I'm talking about like as far as distracting enough that they don't want to listen to the show.
Fair enough.
Yeah. The quote is. It's something that I want more people to understand what it means, and we should kind of dive into kind of what does it mean, right? So when you were to look at, by the way, so yeah, you were talking about reading it. So one, if you were to read it, it's in. I wouldn't actually invite you to read that book unless you've read the six books before it.
Oh, got it. It's part of that series.
Yeah, it's the 7th book in my main series, The New World. And it's where the main protagonist is talking to his grandson. And he tells him this one thing.
Where did that quote come from?
What's that?
Where did that quote come from? I mean, you just came off the top of your head when you were writing?
No, the quote is, there's been variations of it sitting around anyway. And I pieced it together in my own words. And then itself, when you look at just kind of what it is, though, it's just if you were to take generational theory, like the Strauss-Howe generational theory, if you were to even go back, because the concept itself is timeless. Like I didn't invent like the concept.
Well, Yeah,
One
one of the things
generation
that I thought
making
of,
the other
Jeff,
generations weaker.
like I know that this is also not a religious quote, but one of the things that I thought of when I heard the quote is that I grew up in a very conservative Christian household and I read the Bible a lot when I was growing up. My spirituality has changed quite a bit since then, but when I read the Bible a lot in the Old Testament, you read about Old Testament kings, and this pattern repeats itself consistently,
It does.
specifically with the kings.
Yes.
There's a king that, there's hard times, a strong king comes into place, and then a strong king creates really good times, and then those good times brings in this really weak or evil king, and then that evil or weak king create bad times, and then the cycle repeats.
Yeah. So when you look at just like songs, right? You can have a lot of songs, and some songs will sound the same because there's only so many notes that exist,
Right.
right? So the concept that is in the quote, and there's similar that are out there, the concept is better. It's timeless. Plato talked about it. There was a Muslim historian from the 14th century, Ibn Khaldun, talked heavily about it. He had generational theory as well in his books, had 5 cycles versus 4. So the concept is always there. It's always, we have one generation we believe is harder than the next generation, specifically when you have a nation state or society that starts from nothing and then builds themselves up to like wealth. Typically, the children that are now there, the people that have inherited that, tend to be weaker than, say, the founders, because the founders had to go through adversity. They had adversity. They had to work hard in order to build the empire or build the society that they have, that they can now sprinkle abundance of wealth on to their children and their children's children. And so it's a timeless concept. I just strung these words together. I was at the time really diving deep into generational theory. I was reading Generations by Strauss and Howe. I've always been fascinated by it too, because there is when you're talking like biblical scripture, that there is a cycle to things, and it's kind of eerie how these things work out. Almost makes you wonder if we're living in a simulation, because the way it's just kind of it times itself perfectly every 25 years. There's all these things that occur. And it's like and if it is repeating, then why aren't we learning from the past? But we don't seem to learn from the past. We can have all the information in the
Because
world.
you're clearly a religious conservative, and I can't listen to you because you wrote this quote, Jeff.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. Right.
So wait, when did you write this quote? What year was that? Do you remember?
That was I first wrote it. And I was using it as a meme in like 2013, and then it went into the book in 2015.
Okay.
And then the book was released in 2016.
Do you think that, let's just, maybe the world is too big, but just like the US right now, I'm curious which time you think that we're in, and if we're in the same time that we were in when you wrote the quote.
Yeah, we're in the fourth turning, 100%. The fourth turning is like a generation. So it's around 20, 25 years.
What's the fourth turning?
The fourth turning is taking that from Strauss and Howe. It's generational theory. The fourth turning is the crisis. We're in the midst of crisis. This is where the conflict and bloodletting and war this is where it all comes to a crescendo in conflict. And
what happens after that? What's the fifth?
It goes back to the first turning, which means this is the determining factor of what happens. This is where essentially there's 2 factions essentially, and those 2 factions are going to go to war with one another. It could be 2 ideologies, 2 different cultures, 2 different mindsets, whatever that is, and those 2 factions go to war. Really, and the war can be a world war, it can be a civil war, it could be non-kinetic, kinetic conflict, but whatever there is, there's going to be conflict. And you're going to see an end of an era. And we don't know who's going to be victorious. This is why I've talked to people that are like, oh, they're excited. Like, this is good. Well, as if they assume they're going to be the victors. You don't know that. We don't know who's going to be the victors. And when you look at American society itself, or, even let's go broader than that. Let's look at Western society. Western society is, for generations, centuries now, since the American founding, you've had a concept and a belief in individual freedom, open markets, capitalistic free markets, democracy, republics, representation, things like that. We've seen little other things pop up, communism, socialism, those kinds of things. They pop up and then they like whack-a-mole, they get taken out. They can't survive. But and when you look at the United, now let's just narrow down the United States. So we have this one defining culture. It is kind of a world culture. Again, constitutional republics or democracies and capital free markets. Now we've got, if you look at the United States, we've had that, but now you've got a prominent, and it is on now. Now I have to talk politics. When you look at the left, the hard fringe left spectrum of the political left, it is actually the opposite from a culture and a belief in a market system and a belief in a political system. So for instance, like look at like Bill Clinton, for instance, a Democrat, and you look at George Bush, a Republican. While they were opposing political rivals, they both believed in a constitutional republic. They believed in democracy and they believed in free markets. They just believed in different ways of applying certain things, but they believed generally in the same kind of overall concept of how people should be governed in the markets of which we should be entering into. The far left now is a complete, utter different culture. They believe in
I mean, just even that example, like I don't think anyone could argue that looking at, like, let's use our two most recent presidents, looking at Biden versus Trump compared to Bush versus Clinton, those are worlds apart. Like Bush and Clinton were so much closer ideologically on so many different levels than Biden Trump, as an example.
Yeah, and then when you look at like then when you go and look at some of the others that sit on the hard political left, and I'm just pointing these out. Yeah, I'm not. You can say I'm attacking it, but I'm just pointing out the difference. They actually are culturally different than anyone that's, say, a classically liberal person that's center left or anyone center to the right. They tend to be more a believer in communal ownership, communism, so to speak. So they want a market system. They hate capitalism. You hear it all the time. They're not capitalists. In fact, they hate capitalism. And so if you're not going to be a capitalist, then you're probably going to be a socialist or a communist, which is the opposite. And then you have, they don't necessarily believe in, they say democracy, but then when you look at how things play out, they'd rather have elites pick their leaders. They'd rather, so what we have now in this country, and this is what I think Strauss and Howard were talking about, and this is why we're in a crisis and we're heading toward conflict, is you have two distinct cultures that exist on the landmass, that exist here, that are vying for power. You have anyone that believes in free markets, that are capitalists, that believe in a constitutional republic, and then the other people that they're opposite of that.
You know what's really interesting about that too, that I was just thinking about as you're having this conversation, is that, you know, we're having this conversation in 2025. Next year is America's 250th anniversary since Declaration of Independence in 1776, right? Which is kind of a big deal, you know. It's 250 years. It's a long time. Not a long time for a lot of nations, but it is for ours. So It's really interesting that we're on this precipice right around the corner from this anniversary too. I wonder, so to go back to the quote, and the thing that I really want to make sure that we address, because it's the thing that people are listening to this podcast for. So how does this, let's bring it from the world to the US to now men. Let's talk about men specifically. Masculinity, men, two different things, obviously. I understand that. But how do you feel like this quote and everything that we're talking about right now has to do with individual men? Do you feel like men are in a crisis right now as well?
Absolutely. I think men are in a crisis. Yeah. I think
what's the crisis?
I think masculinity has been under assault for a long time. I think when you look at, and this is my own opinion.
We want your opinion.
The slingshots here.
Say everything that you need to say to get this podcast canceled right now. Go.
Let's begin. All right. Start with
all about it. I'm surprised I haven't been canceled yet with some of the things I've said on the show. So I'm all good.
If you're not getting canceled, you ain't trying, bro. All right. So there's always been some kind of a war of the sexes, so to speak, right?
Right.
And you know, when you go back to I think it was like first wave feminism, right, with the rise of abolition movement and things like that. Not the abolition movement. I'm thinking of the right for them to vote, right? You have that. Suffragist movement. Yeah. Yeah. And so you have, that's kind of the first wave of feminism. And then you get, so when we hit like the third wave feminism, which is like in the 70s, I believe, and then we're entering into this where now we're kind of mired in this fourth wave feminism where it was one thing. I think you mentioned a quote you'd heard about someone from the third wave feminism talking about men. Remember we were talking before?
I did.
About how men were also victims.
I'll read it to you again because it
ties into that, because now it seems like under fourth wave feminism, we can't even look at men's issues or want to defend men or try to protect their access to things or try to take care of them, because there are certain women, not all women, there are certain women that feel that somehow looking out for men attacks women.
Yeah. So I'm going to read the quote, because one of the reasons I want to read the quote as well is because of who the quote comes from. So Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique, and I've mentioned this on the show before. If you have not read The Feminine Mystique and you would call yourself a feminist or even lean in that direction, go read the book before you're going to call yourself that, because this is really supposedly where feminism comes from, or at least this wave of feminism, to your point. So go read the book and make sure you actually agree with it, because I would tell you that I disagree with a lot of the stuff that's going on in feminism today, but I agree with a lot of the things in this book. Here's a good example. Here's the quote. Men weren't really the enemy. They were fellow victims suffering from an outmoded masculine mystique that made them feel unnecessarily inadequate when there were no bears to kill. So her whole point here is men aren't the enemy. They're the ones that actually feel just as inadequate as us females, and they don't know what to do about it. And from my perspective, the way that feminism has taken that is that anything that becomes masculine is wrong. It's toxic, it's chauvinistic, it's evil, it's wrong. So what's the solution to, quote, toxic masculinity, which doesn't exist? And we could go off on a whole podcast episode about that. But what is the solution? Let's just say it does. What's the solution to toxic masculinity? Femininity. So what happens? A primarily masculine man. Would you consider yourself a primarily masculine man or primarily feminine man? Just out of curiosity.
Masculine.
Okay. So two primarily masculine men having a conversation right now. The majority of men, by the way, are primarily masculine. Some men are primarily feminine. True with women as well, right? There are outliers, but the majority of men are primarily masculine. So two primarily masculine men. What happens if we show our masculinity in a, quote, toxic way? The solution that's given to us is become more feminine. What happens when a primarily masculine man becomes more feminine? Is he being more authentic to himself or not?
Of course he's not. No.
Of course he's not. So if I'm living as a chameleon, not being authentic to myself, forget masculine and feminine for a second. Is that a good thing?
Of course not.
It's never a good thing to live inauthentically. But that's what the entire feminist movement is telling us to do right now. They're telling us, if you're a man and you show your masculinity, that's wrong. Be more feminine. No, fuck you. I am a masculine man. I'm going to show my masculinity. Now, does that mean it needs to be toxic and I need to go abuse people and kill people and everything else? No, that's not masculinity. Masculinity protects people. It serves people. It's courageous. It's strong. It goes to war. It does all these things that are good and good for, culture and people and everything else. It's not evil.
No, we need that. I know this is what's interesting is you see this now in popular culture, where again, this must be the form of the fourth wave feminism, and that is a strong woman now has masculine traits. They're tough. They're bravado. They know how to fight. They can kick everyone's ass. It's like, so essentially the modern woman is really just a man without a place.
Yeah, I agree with you. But how many women have you talked to how many women have you talked to individually that actually enjoy that role?
No, they don't at all. My wife does not like it at all. No.
Usually women, it's a domino effect, right? Like if I start acting, and I've done this before. So again, first to admit this here, I did this in my marriage as an example. If I start bringing on more feminine traits because I think that that's the solution, my wife's only chance is to bring on more masculine traits to try to match that energy. And now guess what? We're both living inauthentically in an energy that's not primarily ours, and we're both fucking miserable.
Yeah, 100%. I found with my wife, she's told me this, she thrives and her femininity comes out when I'm just being myself as a man. And the roles that I provide for the family, which her and I agreed upon, that I provide for them. My wife has stayed home with the kids ever since my daughter was born 17 years ago. Even though she was incredibly an achiever, and very successful by herself when before the kids. I mean, she did really, really well financially. And then the second she was all prepared to go back to her job, and then she was holding Scarlett in her arms in the nursery, and I was walking by, and it was like a day and a half after Scarlett had been born or whatever it was, and she looked at me and she goes, "I'm not going back." I'm like, "You're not going back?" She said, "You figure it out."
That's awesome, brother.
And the thing is, men will do that. Men will figure it out. That's what we're built to do. Like, you don't have to stress. You don't freak out. And I was like, "Okay, I'll figure it out. All right, got it." She, I'm here to support you. She's like, I'm here to like help you in every way, but I'm not going back. And she never went back. She stayed with the girls, and she's been like ever since. She's never gone back to conventional work. She's helped out here and there with our companies, but she thrives in being the caretaker for the girls, being present, being with them, the nurturer. I love it. It's like I think with something I've told women, and this shocks women, and they always think sex is what drives men. I was like, well, yeah, sex is a motivator. I said, the most important thing when I talk to guys, what they really want when they come home is peace and harmony in the house. And I say, I think it really, women want to understand men. And then when man goes, listen, just be peaceful. Just don't bring me more stress. I want to come in the home, and just when I come back, I want the house to be peaceful, harmonious, stress-free. Like, that brings me more than getting laid. Like, there's so much more value to that than I think women understand. And so I do. It's so funny. I'll tell them that, and they feel like I'm speaking another language to them, because they've been told men only want sex. Now, of course, we're driven. Of course, there's motivation. We have that carnal desires. But when it comes really down to it, and maybe I'm speaking for myself, maybe there's some outlier guys out there that are all about just always constantly getting it on. But we just want peace and harmony. And
you're not an outlier. It's if every guy's honest, that's what he feels. The guys that are out there just trying to, fuck as many women as possible are doing it out of insecurity, some sort of something they're trying to prove to the world. And I get it. I've been there before in my life. But one thing I want to tell you, Geoff, is that's awesome. I love that story. And I love the fact that you guys worked that out. That I think it's really beautiful. And I think frankly, I think it's a shame that we live in a society where even at the beginning of telling me that story, you kind of paused your word, like you kind of hesitated with the words, because it just comes across now like, oh, well, she's not a complete woman. That's all she does.
Yeah. And it is a shame, because,
it's really a shame.
Yeah. Because listen, none of us would be here if we didn't have mothers.
No, well, somebody's going to raise your kids. Somebody's going to raise your kids. So is it going to be somebody that you hire to raise them? Is it going to be the next door neighbors? Is it going to be the uncle, or is it going to be their own mom?
That's the question. It's a hard question to have with women sometimes, because then they feel like they're being attacked. And because you pose that question, because do you love your kid? Of course I do. Then why are you giving your kid up to some stranger? Like like when you pose it that way, like heads explode. But like, you really love your kid that much? Then why are you giving your kid away? Like, again, that's, people get bristly when you put it that way, but that's a good point. And that, by the way, my wife, I didn't have to come to that decision. My wife is like, I got this. Are you kidding me? I worked so hard for this. This is everything. Why? I can't have someone else watch her. No one's going to love her like I will. Not saying these people aren't bad. Not saying these caregivers are bad. These things. No, that no one's going to love her like me. No one's going to instill in her the values like me. Like, you're 100% right. And so we just figured it out. Like, was it easy? No, we lost a large sum of our income, but at the same time, I was prompted to figure things out. Like, men are like, this is what I think is fascinating about men. Men will figure shit out. If you just let them alone, don't nag a guy. A man who wants to produce will figure stuff out. They will make it happen.
I mean, I had to learn just by fire, right? Because it was the same situation when I was married, is that she didn't work outside the home. She stayed home with the kids, and all that sort of thing. And then when we got divorced, all of a sudden it was like, okay, now for, almost half the time when they're with me, I got to figure out how to do all the same stuff, but then also have my kids half the time, right? So that you just have to figure it out, though. Like a lot of people, it's funny because I get this question a lot, especially from people that don't really know me and then see inside of my life and how much just taxing around and picking up kids and doing things with kids and that sort of thing. And could I hire that out? Sure, I could. Do I hire some of it out? Sure, I do. But they watch me and I get the same question a lot. And the question is, I don't understand how you do it all. And I was like, look, I don't think I'm doing anything heroic over here. I'm just figuring it out because I have to figure it out. Like, I don't have a choice. What else am I going to do? Just like leave my kids somewhere? I'm not going to do that. That's my number one priority. And I'm going to blink and they're going to be gone. So I might as well do it while they're here. Because if I don't do it while they're here, and I've seen this happen to people as their kids age, if I don't do it while they're here, they're not going to want to spend time with me when they're an adult.
Yeah, there is so much bonding that's happening during those years.
And it's not even just like that even sounds selfish the way I say that. So I feel like I want to reword that. It's not even that I want them to spend time with me. Of course, I do want them to spend time with me. But also, again, it's who's teaching your kids, because your kids are going to learn from something.
Of course,
So are you just going to let them learn from the iPad and from their friends and from the older brother of the friend that you don't really want them talking to? Or are they going to learn from you? And are you going to take the time to have those conversations with them?
Well, their little brains are like little recorders, and their eyeballs are open up in their ears, and they're just absorbing, they're vacuuming in information constantly, and they're taking it all in. It's part of how they develop. It's like when you get a computer and you have to upload the software. That's what it's doing. They're uploading everything
All the time,
constantly uploading. And if you're not the one doing it, they're getting the upload from somebody else.
all the time.
It's coming from somewhere, but I love this. People always talk. My wife was talking about the other day about like the journey versus the destination. I say, well, actually, both are equally great. Like if you're trying to go somewhere, like say you're building a company, you want to get to $1 million. Okay, well, guess what? When you hit $1 million, that's a great day to celebrate. That's amazing. That's a great destination. But the journey is also equally as important. I don't think one is more important than the other. I know that people like the journey is more important. Like, I disagree. They're equal. The journey teaches you a lot. You learn a ton on the journey. You are having fun. You're also having hardship or suffering. You're dealing with shit or whatever that is. But there's a lot that happens in the journey. But then the destination's really cool too if you get there, right? I mean, if you don't celebrate, the journey part can be in anything in life. It can be trying to get fit. It can be whatever that is, like starting a business, in a relationship, having kids. All of it's the same. The journey is amazing, and then the destination's just as cool.
And if you don't celebrate the destination, then what's the point?
You have to celebrate it. And when I coach authors all the time, I tell them, it's like, listen, you're going to learn a lot when you're writing it, but when you put the end on your rough draft, save it. Close your computer and go celebrate, because you've just written a book. Now it's in a rough draft form, and you're going to open your computer the next day and go back to work, reading the book now, starting the rewrite, starting the heavy lifting of all that. I said, but in a rough draft, you've accomplished something that few people have. You've written a book. Go celebrate that little accomplishment right now. Take it all in, bask it in, because you need to. I think it helps with the psyche. Then the next day you get back at it again, set a new goal. And I'm going to reread this and do rewrites. And you have a new destination, new goalpost you hit.
Yeah, my like, I call it my big book, because the other book that I wrote is kind of this small little book. It was still a book, so I'm not invalidating it, but this is one that I'm more proud of. And it'll probably be out by the time this recording is out, just looking at timeline and how many podcast episodes we are backed up right now. So it's probably out. So go buy it. But the only reason I'm bringing it up is because I remember when I set the date for when it was going to be published. And that day I celebrated. Because it was like it was the same thing. It was like I already had the rough draft. I knew it needed to go through rounds of editing and other things. And I have somebody illustrating it for me. And so, I knew there was a bunch of other stuff and that it wasn't actually going to be on a shelf. But I was like, look, I have the date. I know that it's going to come out this date, so I'm going to celebrate that. And I think that for me, sometimes as a builder, doer, action-oriented type of guy, that's really hard for me to do. because I don't like celebrating something even until it's done. And then when it's done, it's not up to my standards anyway. So I still don't celebrate.
Yeah, that can be tough because then, then what can you celebrate then if you can't celebrate?
Exactly. Nothing.
Right?
That's why I've like I try to convince myself to almost go the other way. Like this book isn't even published yet, but I'm going to celebrate the fact that I've already set a date. Like I already know it's going to come out.
I think that's completely appropriate. That's absolutely appropriate. Now, I wouldn't be like dancing around every way for the next week. I mean, take a little bit of a moment that rejoice in what you've accomplished. You've set that date. It's a hard date, right? That it's got to be done. And you know it's going to be done because you've got all these other moving parts. Some people will set a date, never written a word. And that's a different story. Setting a date in itself is not the accomplishment. It's setting the date because you already have all these things lined up. That makes perfect sense.
And you know, again, like I can think a couple years ago, I hit a really high revenue number for me in my businesses. And it was something that like years before I never thought that I could do. Right. And I was really proud of it. I was really excited. I remember this 1 month of just, you know, best revenue. Like I had as much revenue in a month than I used to in years. Right. And it was just a really good year. And I remember celebrating it for about a half a second. Like I remember being really excited, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I was like, why didn't I hit X? Like it was like immediate. Just like, well, what's the next thing? And I literally had to stop myself and be like, okay, can you just fucking chill for 2 seconds and just celebrate the fact that you did this through your hard work and your effort and everything else? Man, why is that so hard for us to do? So here, let's come back. I want to make sure we focus. And I have my ADHD squirrel brain on today as usual. So can we come back to what we were talking about before about masculinity being in crisis?
Yeah.
Can we unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, again, we kind of went in the weeds about femininity or feminism, the third wave, fourth wave feminism. And I think it's in crisis because you have a concentrated effort brought on by popular culture, fourth wave feminists that are just attack masculinity. And you see it's portrayed in popular culture everywhere. The guy's always clumsy and dumb and this, you know, and it's this constant barrage and assaulting. And then you see it play out in academia. So you see this concentrated effort. And this is why I think you now see a rebellion in with like, I think what would it be called? Gen Z men are very, very conservative, actually. I know my daughter's 17. So in high school, these high school young men, very masculine, actually. Like I see them at the gym all the time. They're working out and they're listening to podcasts like yours. Because they've been barraged. So imagine they're in school and they're being hit with this all the time. They're being attacked for being men and toxic and all these other traits that they're not supposed to have. And a lot of them are rebelling against it. And they're just not having any of it. I mean, I think people will take so much and they're like, nope, I'm done. Some guys probably turn to become incels, which I think I don't know why they would do that. They should just lean in and just like, why would you like disappear? Why would you take yourself off the market? I don't understand why a guy would.
Oh, there's a massive move towards that right now.
Yeah. I don't know why but I'm seeing in my
you don't know why
generation, like a lot of young.
What do you think it is? I bet you could come up with some guesses, Geoff, of why.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I know why, but I would just hope that they don't, because they're valued. We need all men to be participating in society.
Yeah, I understand that, but here's the thing though. If a man does not have a very strong internal compass and confidence that his masculinity and his authentic masculinity is needed in the world, if he doesn't have that, then he needs validation from somebody else to tell him that that's needed. And he's not getting it right now in today's world.
No.
So you take young men. I mean, I struggle with this still. I struggle with insecurities aplenty at 41 years old. So I go back 20 years ago and think about when I was 21. Did I have the internal confidence and clarity and everything else to be able to bring my true masculinity to the world when the entire world was telling me that it was bad and evil and toxic and chauvinistic? No, not at 21. Yeah, maybe some guys do, but I don't think it's a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if that's the case, and I'm not again, I don't want this podcast to sound like we're blaming society and feminism. We're not. I think that this is just a result of what's happening because frankly, I blame the men, because men should rise up and rise up other men. That's why I have this whole podcast in the first place. Stop being, non-authentic to your nature. Rise up as men and allow younger men to rise up underneath you. So this is not society's fault. It is not women's fault. It is not feminism's fault. It's men's fault. It's 100% men's fault. We need to take responsibility for it.
Take ownership. Yeah.
But what I've seen happen in culture is that, to your point, a lot of these younger guys, especially Gen Z guys, are looking up to influencers online that are very masculine and also have very toxic traits, because they seem to be some of the only men that are out there that are saying being a man is good, being masculine is good. But what that tends to come with is a lot of like toxic shit too. And for whatever reason, and I do this the same thing too, but there are no heroes and villains, right? Like every hero also has villain aspects to him. Every villain has hero aspects to him. So I don't understand why somebody will take that person and be like, well, you either love him or you hate him. There is no middle ground. No. You can respect certain things that he says. You can look at certain things that he does and then disrespect other things. Like, it's not all in one. This is not a black and white bullshit thing. Like, there is no perfect person or terrible person. Like, everybody has good and bad. So, but I think younger, like when I was 21, I think I thought more in those black, white terms, more of like, well, here's the hero, here's the villain. So if I see a guy out there and he's the one guy that's saying masculinity is awesome, being a man is awesome, here's all the reasons why this is good, go work hard, go get in shape, go do all these other things. And then he also says, go sleep with as many women as possible and don't care about their feelings or their emotions or anything else, and just, get as much as you want sexually, which is evil and toxic. I'm going to believe both of those things because he's the only one that's telling me, yes, be a man. And if it's compared to listening to this guy, who everyone on the podcast knows who I'm talking about.
Oh, I know
one specific guy I'm talking about. I've just already mentioned his name and I keep getting flagged on TikTok every time I mention his name for some reason. So there's guys like that, right? But if it's, I either follow this guy over here and like 75% of what he says is great, 25% of it's toxic, or I follow this society over here that says, don't be a man, be inauthentic to yourself and be feminine. Well, guess what? I'm picking this side if I'm 21 all day long.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up perfectly. Yeah.
And what my question continues to be is, where are the men that aren't doing that? Where are the men that actually are willing to be authentic masculine men and do their thing like I'm trying to do? I fail all the time, but where are those guys? I think you're one of those guys, just based on our previous conversation, on our conversation today. But why does that not get as much headway? Just because it's not as dramatic? Because I'm not talking about sleeping with 2,000 women a year. So therefore, who cares? Maybe.
It also, there's also the amount of effort that takes, I think, to get places as well. There's something, I know his allure, and it makes sense. And I've listened to some of his stuff, and he's spot on some things.
Absolutely.
About men taking ownership of their lives. And, and then you're right. Then he goes, then he destroys all that by going way over here with the other shit. And which he doesn't even need to do. And I'd be curious if you were to, talk to him years ago, like, and show, if you could show him how his message has been diluted because of that. Would he have done that, or would he just leaned into the other? But then again, he's had a very complex and complicated, existence as far as, where he's from, how he's risen up and how he's made a lot of his money. But, but there are men out there. I think someone that's kind of out there that's in the spotlight today, that like Andrew Huberman. I like him a lot. And I think he, in a lot of ways, has got there's women calling him like the Huberman husbands and things now. These are guys that listen to Andrew, and what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're listening to him, not because he's not giving this kind of advice. He's not talking about, philosophical topics or political topics. He's just talking about science and how to improve your body, which, by the way, but he talks about things that are very clear about gender, like men do really good with this and testosterone and this and all, and he's because one thing I think that can fix men is to become more physical. And what I mean by that is having a concept of physicality, becoming strong. This is why I think you see some of the appeal with the Rogan, kind of that Rogan sphere, where you got these are men that are very physical, now that the MMA, that whole thing, UFC going on, but just this concept of being fit, taking care of your body, and I think lots of confidence, young male confidence comes when they challenge themselves physically. There's a confidence they build in themselves when they do that. And I don't necessarily know, like, young men are given a lot of outlets that way today, because young boys tend to be more hyper than girls. And we tell them to shut up and sit down, or they've got ADHD, let's put them on some drugs. When really we should understand that young boys are just different in their development, and they just need to go out and just beat themselves up, put them in a playground and let them roll around. like that's how they thrive. They thrive that way. They thrive.
Nothing really changes either, by the way.
What's that?
I said nothing really changes either way, right? Like, you get into your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, it's still the same answer. It just looks a little different.
Yeah. Like,
I'm not necessarily wrestling people on a playground, and I'm not an MMA fighter, because obviously I've aged out of that, even if I could be back in the day. So clearly that's not what's happening, but there's other ways. I was watching this. So the main person that I've looked up to and respected, who I think is the GOAT of all time, is Tony Robbins. And a lot of his speaking about masculinity and femininity is probably not public, but if you go to any of his events, he speaks very openly about it, and it's amazing what he does, because he talks all about how you can make relationships better and how you look at those energies and everything else. I've probably learned more about relationships and masculinity and femininity from him than anyone else. And normally you wouldn't think of his name when it comes to that sphere, but he's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of his content, and you're right. There's a lot of his content that he does dive into that.
Oh, very, very deep. And I was watching, so I just recently went to another one of his events. I've probably been to 8 or 9 at this point. And this one, he was doing an intervention with this couple, and he was talking to this guy who had a pattern that every time him and his wife got into a fight, he would leave and go play golf, because he was a golf pro. And there was a lot of things about how to communicate and what was wrong with that and all that sort of stuff that he went into. But the thing that really got me was when he finally came to the conclusion of why the guy left. And the guy left because of the fact that he didn't feel like he was having any sort of success or making any progress at home every time those conversations started. So he just wanted something that he felt like he was accomplishing, something that he felt like he was succeeding at, something that he felt like, well, at least I can do this well. And the moment he said that, even as a single man, I related to it. And the reason why is because I can think I even just went through a really tough season with business. It was my winter. We all go through these cycles, right? It's winter, fall, spring, summer. I just went through a winter season in one of my businesses. And during that winter season, I found that at night, I was every single night, it was like, I either want to act out and medicate with something, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever, or I want to go play pool. Because pool is something that I'm good at. I can walk into most bars and probably keep up with most of the people that are playing pool. And it never triggered in my mind that the reason I wanted to do that is because if I'm not feeling like I'm having success or making movement in all these other areas of my life, at least I can go do that and have a little challenge, have a little success, have a little, kind of that quick dopamine hit, which I think is the same thing you're talking about to these young guys getting in the gym. It's not just about getting in the gym. I'm so fucking tired of hearing influencers say to get in the gym all the time. To me, like, the reason I finally made a commitment to work out every day is because of the fact that it challenges me and gets me moving. It changes my physiology. It's not about me becoming the buffest man that I know and having the lowest body percentage, even though I have goals for that stuff. I'm not like the gym guys. I don't care. I want it for energy. I want it to be able to feel like I'm accomplishing something. I want it to be able to lift heavy things, to do difficult things, because if I start the morning that way, then guess what? The other difficult things throughout the day become less difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with the other influencers talking about, because I found that that's a remedy that it's like an easy remedy I can give guys that are feeling kind of like the world isn't going well for them. There was a friend of mine that a couple of years ago, his marriage was falling apart, and I don't want to go into the nitty gritty. And so I met with him, and I literally looked at him and I said, you need to take ownership of everything. He goes, not everything's my fault. It's like, you need to stop it. Take ownership of everything. And I said, the next thing you do is you need to make yourself very high value. And and what that means is that you need to straighten your mind. I need to exercise. I call it exercise into this trifecta. So you need to exercise your body. So I said, you need to start moving your body. You need to get in the gym. And it's just, trust me, a lot of that stuff will melt a lot of shit away. But you also need to exercise your mind and your spirit. And a lot of people leave those things behind.
Absolutely.
So you need to exercise your mind and body as much as you exercise. Your mind and spirit as much as you exercise your body. You get to do it on a daily basis. And I do it through meditation. And I said, you have to meditate twice a day. I said, you have to do it like you have to breathe. Like you get up in the morning and you meditate. And I said, and it's going to be difficult, but you're going to train your brain to be quiet, to sit there and I said, the more you do that, then you'll get better at it. And you'll start to see incredible differences. You'll be able to think differently. You'll be able to process the stress differently. And he took I also told him, I said, stop drinking. I gave him all these really pointed advice. I said, right now, things traumatic. The last thing you need to do is be diving into a bottle or doing drugs. I said, trust me, it's going to make it worse. I said, you need a radical.
Women and sex. Let's just bring that one up as well.
And what's that?
I said, or women and sex.
Yeah, and I told him, I told him that too. I said, I told him he needed to be by himself. I said, you need to be like Jesus going into the wilderness. I said, you need to go into the wilderness right now. And in the wilderness is where you're going to suffer, but you're going to find yourself. You need to go in there, and there you're going to discover all yourself, because all the answers are in here. You can find them. They're all in here. You just got to go over there and do it, though. And it's going to suck. You're going to suffer, but where you're going to get radical transformation. He's one of the only human beings that literally took my advice to a T. And it was 6 months later, I was seeing him here and there, but 6 months later, he finally pulled me aside. He goes, dude, I had tears in his eyes. He goes, you saved my life. Mm-hmm. Just because I was able to process all the divorce so much better because I was clear-headed through all the meditations, and plus my body, and he looked great. He was he got ripped. He wasn't going for that. He was just working out, but that was driving him to the gym. He's liking how he feels. And again, there's confidence that comes from that. But just, he had stopped drinking. He had stopped doing drugs. All those things had gone. So he had the fog had lifted, and he could think clearly. And of course, you've been through that experience. Your mind can be scrambled eggs, right? And he appreciated it immensely. And he said, you're right. I needed to be alone. It's the only way you're going to figure this shit out. You got to be alone.
Absolutely.
Got to be alone, man. I'm not saying be a loner, but there's a moment of time you need to check out and be by yourself, and you figure it out. And he did. And he's come out like a better man.
I love that.
And his sons have but it also gave him time too, because he wasn't chasing tail. He had times with his sons, and and the times that he would go and spend this incredible time with his boys. And again, I think the bond with his kids became tighter. His business grew tremendously because he wasn't distracted. He had that distraction happening, but there wasn't the other distractions, the self-imposed inflicted wounds of, I'm going to drink too much. I'm going to chase too much tail. I'm going to do this. And let me hook up with another woman. Oh, she's married with kids. Dude, just be by yourself. You don't need any other bullshit. His business, 10X, had all this great stuff happen for him. Just because he took care of himself.
Yeah. And I want to point out, I love the fact that you said this, because I'm so tired of watching influencers talk about your money and your business and your six pack, and that's it. Because yes, are those important? Sure. Should we grow our business and get a six pack? Sure. I see the benefits of both. But what you said is really, really key, where I don't hear them talking about mindset, your spirit, where you're at physically, emotionally as a guy. Of course, God forbid we talk about that as a guy. We're not allowed to be emotionally in a good spot. But those things have to be worked on just as much, because sure, you could be a fucking meathead that has a great business and be a fucking disaster as a human being. And that's not where I want to live. I just don't want to be authentically there.
Tony talks about all the time, controlling your emotional state. And that's what, when you meditate and you practice that, just like you're practicing going in the gym and doing biceps one day, or doing back and bis or chest and tris, whatever that is, you're doing meditation. and you're practicing that daily, you're now able to control your emotional state when it's critical. Nothing's worse than a man who has temper tantrums.
The thing, I agree. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is like some people take meditation far too literal as far as whatever type of meditation, but meditation can be a lot of different things. It doesn't just have to be you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of different types of meditation. I'm trying a new meditation right now with my coach, because of course every coach needs a coach, where I'm literally just putting dots on a page. And it's just this rhythmic thing of putting dots on a page for like a half an hour, just thinking about putting dots on a page that like fucking clears my head better than probably any other meditation I've ever tried in my life.
Really? You just sit there and you draw dots?
Yeah. Literally, you pull out a piece of paper and you just dot a page just in a rhythmic fashion. And the goal is you're not supposed to be creating any sort of pictures or elements or anything else. You're just going like this. And every time my squirrel brain takes over, I just think, I'm putting dots on a page. I'm putting dots on a page. I'm putting dots on a page. And if that doesn't work, then I go to my validations. You're a strong, courageous man. You're a leader. You're, those sort of things. And it's a very rhythmic process that's been really helpful for me. I found the same thing through walking with no technology. Just literally walking around a beautiful area and just trying to focus on exactly what I'm seeing and not my thoughts, right? There's a lot of ways to meditate. But one thing you said earlier, I wanted to come back to right before, because I know we got to end here in a second, but this made me think of this. True of women, of course, as well. But all men seek validation. We all do. We all want to be validated for the things that we do specifically. All men seek validation. Where men get into trouble is that they seek validation from things that are not going to assist them in becoming the most authentic version of themselves. So what is that? Well, it could be some sort of medicating behavior like alcohol or drugs, or it could just be women, or it could be dating, or it could be work, or it could be that six-pack. It could be a lot of different things. There are only two things. There are only two ways for a man to be truly validated. And that is for me to have the most authentic, loving relationship with myself, and for me to have the most authentic, loving relationship with my higher power, whatever you call that, God, universe, higher power, whatever. I don't care what you call it. Those are the only two things. Because what I've found in my life is every time I've tried to be validated from anything else, it never goes well in the end. It just doesn't.
I agree 100% with that. Yeah, I was talking to someone not that long ago, and when it comes to love, people say, I love this. Like, you cannot love anything unless you love yourself.
100%.
You cannot love. And this is something like, it was a conversation I had with my wife. It was a while ago. She kind of took it wrong when I first mentioned it. But I was like, I don't ever want to need you. I want to want you. At first, she took that, was like, what does that mean? I was like, well, needing means I don't really want you around, but I need you around, which sounds very codependent or dependent. And it's also like, if I found something else that could fill that, this could be gone.
100%.
Right. And so the concept of wanting is like, I want you around because I love you, because I love everything about you. So I desire you to be in my space. I do anything to have you in my space because I want you versus I need you. And I'm whenever I get a chance, and I don't throw this at anybody, whenever people are open for me to mention it to them in relationships, like, listen, you never want to need somebody and no one ever completes you. That stuff is bullshit. Because then again, that's connecting a dependency on them. And that's not how. I'm already complete. And now you and I together are just enhanced, right? But like
one of the worst
is, I don't think it's healthy. You can never need somebody.
One of the worst phrases that I can't stand that people use all the time is, I can't live without you. Now, if we just think about this logically, why would you want to be with someone that can't live without you? I mean, that is a dependent person that is not their own authentically healthy person. Like, I don't want that person around. That seems like somebody that's going to be a burden. How is that person not a burden if they can't live without me?
I agree. It's the same thing. Like, there are parts when, like, there are things that I need from my wife. Again, you go on the micro level, I need her to do this. But the overall macro need in my life, I don't need her. I want her, which, by the way, is actually desiring, because I desire her.
For sure, man. And it's better for her too.
Yes, that's the point. You get what I'm talking about. It's
Yeah.
way better because now I want you. Like I'm going to do everything to make sure that you're always in my space. I will move heaven and earth
Because
because I
need
want
is
you so bad.
an obligation. It's not a desire.
Yeah,
So would you rather have somebody that's obligated to you or somebody that's desiring of you? And I know for myself,
of
if
course.
I'm ever
Everybody
in a
wants.
relationship, I want somebody desiring of me, not
Yes,
somebody
you can
that
have
needs
someone
me.
that's a burning desire for you. What can match that? Right? It's you don't want someone that they're only there because you can provide something for them. Because the minute they can have someone that's better, they moved on. That's where the concept of hypergamy comes up. That's where some guys like, yeah, if they've only gotten their value, or they only thing value they can present somebody is the fact that they have, like, say, financial resources. Well, if someone is bigger and better, has bigger, better, badder financial resources, you can be replaced, bro. And so that would make me feel very, very insecure. You know, like, wait a minute, hold on, I better not have her go. That guy, he's got a Ferrari. Holy shit, he must have more money than me. Can't have her go over there because apparently not bringing anything else to the table.
And another thing, just to say to get me canceled one more time before we end this episode, is that women are designed and created in a way to where when they look around the room, they want to be with the top guy of the 50 guys they know. So if I'm currently the top guy and we're dating, but then something else happens and I'm not the top guy anymore, it's very appealing for her to get to the top guy because that's just a natural feminine instinct that came from when guys actually protected women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want the strongest, biggest, fastest, best man to be able to protect me. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a woman being manipulative or like cheating on people or anything else. That doesn't need to include any of that. It's just naturally wired in that they want the strongest, best man to protect them, to be
Yeah,
there for them.
I will say this. I think that sometimes that does freak men out. Like, oh my God, then they feel very insecure. I do think women can be a little bit more nuanced than that, meaning like they might respect that, but it doesn't mean you're going to. So say you're a great provider and you're a great father. They've had children, so she's living in a very secure place, so she feels secure and safe. She's not necessarily about to jump ship because she's introduced to the single guy who's hotter and has more money.
Agreed. I'm not saying that.
Okay, that is, I know, but see, that's where it can be confusing sometimes because what that means, because that in itself has risks. Just because he has more doesn't mean he wants to give it to her. Right. And so there's lots of risk that she loses everything, all provisioning by abandoning the one guy for the next. So it has to be a really solid. That's why women are sometimes can be they can take a long time and suffer under, say, a guy who's a bad husband. They'll suffer for a period of time and then they'll jump ship. But they're not, you know, so
but I guess
got all guys. I wouldn't think
on the other side though. Yeah. Maybe don't be insecure, guys, but maybe be insecure. Like, maybe this is a good thing for guys to be insecure about this.
I see your point. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Like, I've learned this the hard way with women that I've dated before in the past, where I just kind of let things slide, and you get out of the romance period, and you just, like, I don't know, maybe she's not feeling as secure. Maybe I'm not giving her as much attention. Maybe I'm not dating her as much. Maybe I'm not doing all these things. Well, you start doing that, and then there's still this guy in this group, and even if we're equals, it might be like, oh, that guy looks kind of interesting over there. I don't really feel like I'm getting all the stuff over here anymore. And that could be her own insecurities and everything else. But I think it might be good for guys to be insecure about this. What it means, though, is it doesn't mean that you have to pretend to be something that you're different. It just means be authentically yourself and keep working at it to become the best version of yourself possible. Because if you're continually becoming the best version of yourself possible, one day that relationship might not work out. But if you are in the spot where you're continuing to become the best version of yourself possible, then that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So forget it if she leaves. If she leaves, that's a good thing if you're becoming the best version of yourself. I've had plenty of women leave my life, plenty, because I was becoming the best version of myself. And even though it's sad, and even though I'm bummed, and even though I grieve it and everything else, at the end of the day, it's a good thing. Great.
Yeah,
it's not a good thing when the women have left me because I neglected them or because I became not as good of a version of myself. I've had that experience as well. But if I'm becoming a better version of myself and then a woman leaves, fuck you. Goodbye. Moving on next.
It's because you're growing and she's not, and that happens. I know I've been to a handful of Tony Robbins things. And I know we've been met with that, where the man or the husband or the wife is at the seminar and the other spouse isn't. And it makes it very difficult because one is wanting to do inner exploration and to learn and to grow, and the other doesn't want to do that. Now, again, that goes back to that Strauss-Howe, two different cultures. You can't have opposing cultures, right? Without, there's going to be a clash. There's going to be a separation. And the same thing happens in a family. You can take a nation state and boil it down to a family, right? And you could say, if you don't have one defining kind of value system or goal for a family or purpose, and you have two different factions, two different belief systems, it's going to be hard to keep those people together.
Absolutely.
If one is wanting to grow, or say one becomes religious and one doesn't, well, you're going to have problems. One decides to stop drinking and the other continues on the, partying like a rock star. Again, you're going to have a problem because they're diverging now. And that divergence becomes too much. It's hard to kind of get across the chasm that's been created. But yeah, you're right. And listen, if you're trying to better yourself, you want to have them come along. Whenever I've done things, I invite my wife all the time. It's like, I love for us to do this challenge together. I want us to do this. I want us to do, because you want to grow together, right? And move in this direction together. And fortunately, I've been blessed that we do those things now. We talk, and probably I say this all the time. It's sometimes I know it's a stereotype for guys not to be able to communicate, but communication I've seen is like the number one killer. Just talk. Just talk. Just express yourself. I'm not saying you have to cry and all that. That's all bullshit. Like, I don't remember the last time I even cried, but just communicate. Yeah. Just say what's on your mind. Like, and be respectful about it. There's no reason. There's a way of communicating something that you dislike or you're not happy with without making her the bad person. Or there's a way of communication that can be effective. And I found, man, when people, because most problems I've seen, whether it's business and personal, the biggest failures are a breakdown of communication. Had it with one of my business partners one time. We just weren't communicating. Finally, things came to a head, and then we had the blowout conversation, and then after half an hour, we were fine. All we needed to do was talk. Had we just talked, it would have been fine.
I 100% agree. And on that note, because we have to wrap up, I'm going to end with this quote that I heard today, which I think really relates to communication. Okay? This is what I heard today, and I thought it was great. Wow. Let's try that again. Unexpressed expectations is the precursor to resentments.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. Unexpressed expectations is the precursor to resentments. 100%. Said another way, communicate more than you think you need to communicate, because if you're not, you have some sort of expectation that's going on in your head that your spouse or your partner or your friend or your lover or your business partner or whoever doesn't know.
Yeah, they don't read minds. And I tell people, and also I would encourage people to find out how to communicate effectively. And, there's people probably you can find on YouTube, because sometimes people communicate and they're like, dude, whoa, whatever you just said, you just made shit worse. Like, there's a way of communicating how you're feeling or what you feel that you would want, but in a way that isn't attacking. There are ways of, because what's the goal? To make the person wrong, or to try to get what you want, to make the relationship move in the direction that you want? I always ask people first, this is something I've been trying to really instill in my girls, like, play the long game, look at something and like, listen, are you trying to be right, or are you trying to get what you want? So if you're trying to define your goal, and once you have your goal defined, now figure the way to get to that. And like, little short wins by making people wrong it's never a good negotiating tactic, by the way. And it
never ends well.
What's that?
It never ends well.
It never ends well.
This podcast is going to end well, though, even though I could talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours, but this is not the Joe Rogan podcast. So we're going to cut it off right here, especially because I got to go here in a couple minutes. But that being said, we haven't even talked about this yet. Usually I do this earlier in the episode, so sorry about that. But what's a good way for people to get a hold of you if they want to continue to get wisdom and knowledge and connect with you?
Got it. So just visit me at gmichaelhopf.com, and there's like a contact page. You can just send something from there.
Fantastic. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. So Geoff, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it. This was a really good conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I
did too. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right, derelicts. Here's what I'd ask you to do, as I always ask you to do, is if something like this, something today spoke to you and anyone popped up in your head, think about it right now. If there's just one guy that pops up in your head, or it can be a gal, sure, too. But if one guy pops in your head, send this to them. Say, hey, listen to minute 25 or whatever. Just was thinking of you. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and I appreciate you continuing to come back. So until next time, we'll see you later, you derelicts.